the screen visible? Okay. So the playwright we are going to study today, and the play which we will read today and have a basic introduction and information about is William Shakespeare's Hamlet. Remember, this is one of the most famous plays in English literature, and I hope you know about William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare is the father figure of English drama. In a way, he is intimately connected with the rise of British literature, and he is seen as a pioneer in the field of British drama. Uh, Shakespeare is well known to all the people who love literature and study literature. He was the most influential writer in all the English literature, all of English literature. William Shakespeare was born in 1564 in a successful मिडिल क्लास ग्लो मेकर इन स्ट्रेटफोर्ड अपॉन एवन इंग्लैंड। किसी का ऑडियो ऑन है बच्चों? एक बार आप अपना ऑडियो से भी ऑफ कर लीजिए, डिस्टर्बेंस आ रही है। ऑडियो ऑन है किसी का? देखिए किसका ऑडियो ऑन, एक बार उसको बंद करिए। या आपको ऑडियो ऑन है? आप देखिए अपना ऑडियो प्लीज। So Shakespeare was born in Stratford upon Avon, England. Stratford is the name of a small town. Avon is the river which flows very close to Stratford. He attended grammar school, but his formal education proceeded no further. Shakespeare was not very well educated. He married prematurely when he was still a young boy. In 1582, he married an older woman, Anne Hathaway. She was quite elder to him, and he had 3 children with Anne Hathaway. Around 1519, he left his family and traveled to London to work as an actor and playwright. Public and critical success quickly followed, and Shakespeare eventually became the most popular playwright in England and part owner of the Globe Theatre. Globe Theatre was the famous theatre owning company which used to stage plays in England. Shakespeare initially walked into this theatre house as an actor, and then he became the director, and then he purchased some shares of Globe Company, and so he became comfortable after a long stint in drama in Globe Theatre. His career blazed the reigns of Elizabeth I, who ruled from 1558 to 1603. James I, who ruled 1603 to 1625, and he was a favorite of both monarchs. So William Shakespeare belonged to what is now known as Elizabethan era and Jacobean era. In both these eras, he worked and produced his works. Indeed, James granted Shakespeare's company the greatest possible compliment by bestowing upon its members the title of King's Men. Shakespeare's association with Globe Theatre was slowly recognized by the monarchs, and James I was very happy with the performance and the kind of play it was producing, and so he gave them a title, an honorary title of King's Men, which was a great honor during that time. So from a poor beginning, he became a wealthy and renowned person, and he retired to Stratford, a small town, and there he died in 1616 at the age of 52. At the time of Shakespeare's death, literary luminaries such as Ben Jonson hailed his works as timeless. So he received much praise even when he was alive, and his work was considered timeless by his contemporaries, particularly Ben Jonson was very much full of praise for him, and he called him a timeless writer. There is a controversy. Since the biography of William Shakespeare is not allowed, some people doubt that Shakespeare's plays, which we study now, were not actually written by anybody called Shakespeare, but they were written by other people who remained incognito, whose names were not out. So some people guess that the plays and the literary output of William Shakespeare was really written by Francis Bacon and Earl of Oxford. Although most of the time guesses remain without any evidence, and most of the critics make it well known. They are shown that there was a person called William Shakespeare. But at the same time, we must know that there is some kind of controversy about William Shakespeare being a real person, and there have been some wild guesses about the real origin of his plays and his output. In the absence of credible evidence to the contrary, Shakespeare must be viewed as the author of 37 plays and 154 sonnets that bear his name. So the literary output of William Shakespeare was limited to 37 plays and 154 sonnets, along with two long poems, which Shakespeare produced. A number of Shakespeare's plays seem to have transcended even the category of brilliance, becoming so influential as to profoundly affect the course of Western literature and culture ever after. It's very difficult to determine exactly the influence of William Shakespeare over English literature and even on the stage of world literature. He is a father figure. He is the initiator. He is the person who is supposed to be the master creator of plays and poems. So his influence has been unmatched on the stage of world literature and to the English drama and English poetry also. So it has been the constant praise which has been heaped over him throughout centuries, and even now he continues to move people, and his name has become synonymous with the highest standards of poetry and drama. Let us now come to historical background of the play Hamlet, which we are going to study. Hamlet is one of the famous tragedies of William Shakespeare, and it was written during first part of 17th century, around 1600 or 1601. Hamlet was probably first performed in July 1602. It was first published in printed form in 1603 and appeared in an enlarged edition in 1604. From the early 17th century, the play was famous for its bold and vivid dramatization of melancholy and insanity. This was not the play was not instantly hit. It took some time to gain popularity. Earlier, it was remembered mostly for the supernatural occurrences which happen in the play, and particularly the atmosphere of melancholy and insanity which pervades the play. The artistic beauty of the play came to be recognized slowly. Initially, it was more famous for the kind of ambience of the play, and people praised and remember this play for the kind of sorrowful, melancholic atmosphere and the appearance of the ghost in the play. Though it remained popular with mass audiences, late 17th century restoration critics saw Hamlet as primitive and disapproved of its lack of unity and decorum. In late 17th century, the play was not highly praised. It was not considered an artistic achievement of William Shakespeare. Many restoration critics, means from 1616 to around 1700, Hamlet was not considered a supreme example of William Shakespeare's genius. Rather, it was criticized as being primitive, and and it was further criticized for its lack of unity and decorum. This view changed drastically in the 18th century, but as we move from Restoration era to Neoclassical era of 18th century, critics started regarding Hamlet as a hero, a pure, brilliant young man thrust into unfortunate circumstances. So slowly, Hamlet, the main character of the play, acquired a cult status. He was praised by critics as representative of a young man who is caught in unfortunate circumstances. So we see there are ups and downs in the receipt of in the reception of the play Hamlet. Initially, the critics were hesitant to accept its brilliance, but slowly it came to be recognized as a masterpiece of William Shakespeare, and it was acclaimed for the brilliant portrayal of its hero. By the mid-18th century, means around 1750, however, the advent of Gothic literature brought psychological, mystical readings, returning madness and the ghost to the forefront. So initially, the play was praised for its characterization, for the brilliant portrayal of its protagonist, Hamlet. But slowly, as the time shifted and time of popularization of Gothic literature and psychological and mystical readings came on the forefront, Shakespeare's merits in portraying Ghost as a credible presence in the play was recognized, and the melodramatic and Gothic elements in the play they came to the forefront, and critics started praising them. Critics started understanding Shakespeare's psychological penetration into such supernatural phenomena. Not until the late 18th century did critics and performers begin to view Hamlet as confusing and inconsistent. So then, another orientation to play was recognized, and that was the opaqueness, the confusing and often contradictory elements within the play. Slowly, critics started understanding the play is not a lucid representation of some clear-cut linear thing. The play has some, paradoxes, and these paradoxes reveal the paradox of human reality on this earth in a very penetrating way. So slowly, those elements which were earlier supposed to be confusing and inconsistent, they came to be recognized as the merits of the play. Hamlet was seen either mad or not. So this became the major focus of critics' understanding of the play. There were huge discussions. There were major discussions on whether Hamlet, the hero of the play, was really mad or not. Then there were discussions and debates regarding whether Hamlet can be called the hero of the play or not. So, the play slowly acquired the status of a masterpiece because of its opaqueness, because of its ability to present paradoxes, because of its ability to forefront inconsistencies. And these inconsistencies, paradoxes, were not seen as demerits of the play. Rather, they were seen as the ability of the writer to produce reality in more than one way. It's not necessary that if a play has paradoxical elements, it means that the play is a weak play or the playwright doesn't know his craft. Paradoxes are inherent part of human existence. And the reality around us can be better understood in terms of paradoxes and inconsistencies rather than in the clear rational light. So, there were huge controversies, there were huge debates surrounding this play. And these debates centered on the status of the hero, the condition of the hero, whether he was mad or he was not really mad, why he is not able to take action, why he delays his action till the last scene of the play. So these contradictions and these questions, they were resolved by critics in different ways, and then the play became very famous in producing these elements before the audience. These developments represented a fundamental change in literary criticism, which came to focus more on character and less on plot. So this shift in critical reception of Hamlet shows that there was a shift in the general sense in criticism. Modern criticism, as we move from 16th century, 17th century to the modern age, criticism also slowly shifts from character and the psychological understanding of the protagonist and the impacts of action and such things instead of simply the story. So as we move from 17th century to 19th century, we find that the criticism has its focus more on character than on plot. By the 19th century, Romantic critics valued Hamlet for its internal and visual conflict, reflecting the strong contemporary emphasis on internal struggles and inner character in general. As we move on to Romantic era, which is from 1798 to 1832, we find that Romantic critics focused on the play's presentation of struggle in the mind of the hero. Since Romanticism, in a way, it moves from outer reality to the inner reality. Romanticism is about subjective experiences. Romanticism is about how self views the world, how a person sees the world outside. So, similar notions were applied on the proceeding of this play, which was seen as presenting the struggle of its hero. And these struggles were not with outer forces, rather, they were struggles within. As we saw in Dr. Foster's, that good angel and bad angel, they are not really physical entities. They may or may not be real physical entities. They may or may not be real persons, but actually they are representative of conflict in the mind of Dr. Foster's. So they are psychological forces. In the same way, Hamlet's struggles with his fate, with the circumstances around him, they were seen as struggles within his own mind, within his own psyche. And the play was seeing how an individual tries to recognize and understand his own destiny in a world which is not favorable to him. Right? So in romantic age, the focus of the critics shifted from the outer reality to the inner struggles within the mind of the hero. Hamlet departed from contemporary dramatic conventions in several ways. For example, in Shakespeare's days, plays were usually expected to follow the advice of Aristotle in his Politics, that a drama should focus on action or character. So Hamlet was different from the contemporary plays in many ways. First of all, it violated certain rules of Aristotle. Now, Aristotle had a major influence over most of English dramatists because he was a classical dramatist, classical lawgiver, and so he was considered an authority over drama. Anybody who wanted to write drama used to consult Aristotle and at least defer to his rules. Now, Shakespeare did not defer to his rules. Shakespeare violates most of the rules given by Aristotle. Aristotle says that a drama is about action, about an action. A drama is not about character. Character is secondary to action. But Shakespeare puts more emphasis on character. He develops the character of Hamlet. So he differs from Aristotle in this sense. In Hamlet, Shakespeare reverses this so that it is through the soliloquies of the action that the audience learns Hamlet's motives and thoughts. We come to know about the character of Hamlet not through what he does, but rather through what he says in his soliloquies. So his speeches become a representative character. Aristotle says that character is revealed in action. You are what you do. But in Shakespeare, you are what you say. So your character is revealed in what you think. What kind of person you are is seen through what you say and not what you do. Right? So it was a different plane over which Shakespeare operated instead of Aristotle's dictum. Now Hamlet. Hamlet is Shakespeare's longest play with 4,042 lines totaling 29,551 words. Takes over 4 hours to deliver. So it's a very long play, perhaps the longest play of William Shakespeare. It has around 4,000 lines and 29,000 words, and it takes 4 hours for its full representation. Hamlet also contains our favorite Shakespearean device, a play within play, a literary device or conceit in which one story is told during the action of another story. There is another interesting device within the play. This is a play within a play. Means within Hamlet, within the action of Hamlet, another play also is played by certain characters in the play. So there is a play within play. In the play of Hamlet, a play is staged. And that play and the discussions around play, they take place about how a play should be written, how a play should be dramatized, what kind of gestures the characters use, how to make a play realistic, so on and so forth. So there is a play within play. नाटक के अंदर नाटक होता है, नाटक के अंदर नाटक खेला जाता है. As was common practice during the 16th and 17th centuries, Shakespeare borrowed for his plays ideas and stories from earlier literature. The story of Hamlet is not written by William Shakespeare in its original form. The story has been borrowed. And this was a common practice during 16th and 17th centuries, that most of the playwrights borrowed stories from earlier texts. They made some changes, they gave it more touches, they made it more contemporary, and they presented it on the stage. So the story is not original, remember. The story was there for a long time. Most of the people knew about the story. And Shakespeare only, modulates the story according to his requirements. Ritu, where is Ritu?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so yes. So this was a very common practice during that time, that the stories were not created by the dramatists, rather they were borrowed from earlier sources, and then they were presented according to the genius of the dramatist, according to the requirements of the contemporary time, so on and so forth. So Shakespeare had taken the story of Hamlet from many possible sources, including a 12th century Latin history of Denmark, compiled by Sexto Grammaticus, and a prose work by French writers Francois de Belfort and listed histories Tresducs. These are two sources from which William Shakespeare might have taken his stories, because in both these two sources, story of William Shakespeare was already present. By the way he had modified the play, Shakespeare was able to take an unremarkable revenge story and make it resonate with the most fundamental themes and problems of the Renaissance. Simply borrowing a story doesn't mean that he was blindly copying whatever the earlier writers had written. Shakespeare made some fundamental changes within the story. The earlier story was simply a revenge story in which a person's father is killed and then he decides to kill the murderer of his father and ultimately kills him. This was a simple story of William Shakespeare, the story of Hamlet in earlier sources. But William Shakespeare made some very interesting changes within that story. He made it resonate with the problems of the Renaissance. He gives more psychological depth to the hero of the story. So some fundamental structural changes were made within the earlier existing stories, and William Shakespeare made this story his own by these changes and by these transformations. Now, although we have already discussed what is Renaissance, let us have a quick look over what Renaissance means. Renaissance is a vast cultural phenomenon that began in 15th century Italy with the recovery of classical Greek and Latin texts that had been lost to the Middle Ages. So Renaissance is revival, a rebirth, which started when classical Greco-Roman texts were discovered in Italy, and slowly the artistic and scientific influence of Renaissance spread to all Europe. So we know the basic contours of Renaissance, how it was a rediscovery of Greek Roman past, and it led to a revival of European society. The scholars who enthusiastically rediscovered these classical texts were motivated by an educational and political ideal called in Latin humanitas. The idea that all the capabilities and virtues peculiar to human beings should be studied and developed to their furthest extent. So Renaissance gave impetus to studies of humanities, and the studies of humanities means how knowledge is linked with development of an individual and all his capabilities. The Renaissance humanism, as this movement is now called, generated a new interest in human experience and also an enormous optimism about the potential scope of human understanding. Renaissance, as we discussed in Dr. Foster's also, that it centered on individual human beings instead of the social existence of humanity. So individuality became the focus of newspaper. Then it was all about search for knowledge, it was all about adventures, it was all about rationality, it was all about scientific thinking. These were some major contributors of Renaissance, and Renaissance focused on humanism, means it focused on individual capabilities and individual experiences as the index of human achievement. So individual became the center. Instead of the social or religious existence, individual human being became the locus of all advancement and all furtherance of knowledge. Hamlet gives a very famous speech in Act 2, and he says, "Oh, what a piece of work is a man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals." So this speech shows the influence of Renaissance humanism, wherein a human being is seen to have infinite capacity, wherein human beings are seen in terms which reveal its potential to achieve anything in the world. This speech is directly based upon one of the major texts of Italian humanists, Pico della Mirandola, Oration on the Dignity of Man. So this speech, which is used in Hamlet, shows the influence of Mirandola's Oration on the Dignity of Man. And in this speech, we also see how human element is at the center of all existence. Human beings are the apex of all creation. They are the highest point of all creation. And now there was confidence in the capacity of human beings to achieve anything. Under religious terminology, human beings are seen as limited beings. Human beings are seen as, incapable of going beyond their limits, as we saw in Dr. Faustus. Dr. Faustus is punished because he tries to cross human limitations. He tries to achieve something which is beyond human experiences. But slowly, under Renaissance, we also saw the dramatists were projecting ideas which were earlier not accepted under religion and under church. Now, it was the thinking human being who was seen as equal, if not greater, to angels and gods. Okay? So this influence of Renaissance is quite visible in William Shakespeare's play Hamlet, and Hamlet becomes an epitome of these qualities. For the humanists, the purpose of cultivating reason was to lead to a better understanding of how to act. So reason was seen as the prime faculty. It is only through reason that we can understand the world and we can understand how we should really act. And their fondest hope was that a coordination of action and understanding would lead to great benefits for society as a whole. And under Renaissance humanism, it was thought that reason and intellect and the progress of science would lead to a better society. That human beings can progress only through the faculty of reason and intellect. So they should cultivate these qualities and they should weigh their actions on the basis of reason, and then if the reason prods them to do something, then they should take that action. So reason became the prime faculty of human beings, and other faculties were slowly forced to bed. So I hope this is okay for today. We shall continue, and tomorrow, let me see.